If you're new to our channel, don't forget to hit the subscribe button.
There's a lot of things in our soil, and microbes is one of those items that we're going to discuss today to understand what microbes are, the benefit that they provide for our garden soil, and what we can do to increase or sustain the life of microbes in the garden. Well, Holly, first of all, what are microbes?
So microbes are basically, they're super small things like bacteria, fungi, things that they decompose the soil, they break down the soil, and they live in the soil.
So it is not a term for a species of insect or bug. It is a broad term of an umbrella of many different items that work together in harmony in the soil.
Right. So it's not just one thing, it's many. So it's not like there's one species, like you said. So microbes are super tiny, essentially.
We're talking microscopic. You can only see them. You can't really pull up a hand full of soil and go, oh, there's 27 microbes there.
No.
Okay.
So there are more microbes in a teaspoon of soil than there are people on Earth. So that's a lot of microbes. Soil contains about 8 to 15 tons of bacteria, fungi, protozoa, nematodes, earthworms, and arthropods. So if the soil contains, soil microorganisms exist in large numbers in the soil as long as there is a carbon source for energy. So carbon means something like the browns, so it can break it down. So like
the leaves,
twigs,
natural dead material.
Natural dead material, yep, and that's what it wants to eat.
And if you do not have that in your soil, let's say the desert, then microbes do not exist because there is no food source for them to survive.
Right. So it also needs nitrogen as well, but the biggest thing is that carbon. That's going to help break it down. So there's a large number of bacteria in the soil that exist, but because of their small size, they're not as harmful. I mean, it's still there, but since it's mixing with everything else.
Because in soil, there's good bacteria, bad bacteria.
Both, yeah.
Yes.
Yep. So there's also fungus in your soil, and they are more prevalent. The fungus is going to be more prevalent in untilled or no-till soils. So if you don't till your soil, if you do like we do, where we disturb it less, you're going to have more fungus, and that's good. You want the fungus because it's going to break things down.
Because you're not disrupting the natural cycle of that fungus in the soil by exposing it to the atmosphere, the oxygen, and disrupting it by turning the soil over.
Right. So if you have a soil that you turn over a lot, maybe you till your soil every spring or every fall, whatever.
Or every other week.
Every other week.
Yeah, some people do.
You're going to have less fungus. You're going to have more bacteria. So basically the bacteria is going to thrive more because it's being exposed to the air.
You need more fungus than bacteria?
That's what you want.
Okay, yeah. For a balanced soil ecosystem.
Yeah.
And by tilling it, exposing it to the air, you're creating less fungus or killing off the fungus in which we have in our soil and allowing the bacteria to thrive because there's not a balance there to keep things in check.
That's correct. So your soil, as we've talked about on the show before, is a living thing. Your soil is a living thing, and this definitely becomes a part of that, talking about this. But the most important thing is that organic matter decomposition serves two functions. One, it provides energy for growth, and then it supplies carbon for the formation of new cells. So when your soil is breaking down, it's multiplying, like the bacteria, the microbes, the microorganisms, the fungi, the decomposers are growing, and they're feeding off the carbon. They're providing energy for more growth for your plants. So it's all like working together. So
when we take the kitchen scraps and the shredded paper or the leaves or the dry grass clippings and put it in the compost pile, this is the beginning stages of what we're trying to accomplish. The bacteria, the fungi working together in harmony, breaking this down and turning it into organic matter that they're feeding off of.
Yeah.
Okay.
So what happens is that it breaks it down, and it can be very aggressive, like if you had a hot compost, or it can be more passive, like a cold compost. So then also there is about 35% of your soil is going to be active at one time. So 65% of it is not going to be active.
So, so go a little deeper in that. Active in what means that the process of converting the organic matter into energy?
Basically, yeah, breaking it down.
Okay, so that only 35% of the time, only 35% of your soil is going to be in an active breakdown process or stage at any given period.
Yeah, so that's not anything that you can necessarily help. It's just
no, but it would make sense because you don't need the whole soil to be active in breaking down 100% of the time.
Right, and the reason for that is that your soil has three different
stages, levels,
I guess, components. There's the living, which is the microorganisms. There's the dead, which is like fresh residue that's dead, like it's been spent. Mm-hmm. And then there's the very dead, which is the fraction of your soil that's thousands of years old, and it's just never going to do anything else.
It's done its cycle. It's just sitting there in the ground.
And it's just there.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's kind of like when you think about that. That's what the 35 versus the 65% is. 35, like some
a
of
certain percentage, it's never going to. It's just there. It's just medium that the other soil sets around. Mm-hmm. Okay. Now we're getting in the science of this, and it's important to understand microbes, understanding how your soil works, because yes, we can just buy compost, put in our garden, plant our plants. Okay, everything's great. Something's not right. Bring more compost in. But if we understand the basic elements and levels of what's really going on from a scientific level in our gardens, we can better achieve a healthier garden and just be more knowledgeable about what really goes on under the soil that we may have not been familiar with or unaware of, that all of these things are working in harmony in order for a plant to grow.
Right.
Because it's not just our garden; it's prairies, it's woods. Without these elements or these microbes doing what they do, life on Earth doesn't exist.
Exactly. Excuse me. Yeah. So it's also good to know that frequently tilled or unhealthy soils release a lower percentage of nitrogen due to their lack of microbial activity. So,
which would make sense on a large agricultural, big ag farm. Tillage of fields is a regular occurrence to loosen the soil. If the farmer's not doing a no-till method for that particular year, to turn over the soil, to plant the seed, to spray the chemicals on the soil to kill the seeds of the weeds, and keep the plants that are there growing away from the weeds, a Roundup Ready type of crop where you can spray that glyphosate on the field and it not kill the plant in which you're trying to grow, but kills everything else that is in its path. So by that continuous tillage of the soil, you're releasing everything into the atmosphere, and it's not giving time for the traditional soil life to regenerate itself.
Right. And also a thing to keep in mind is
and the chemicals are not helping either on that.
No.
Yeah.
Even if this is in your backyard and you till, you have to remember that you need to add organic matter, whether you till or not. And that is because your soil is going to deplete itself of nutrients eventually.
Tilling, and that being adding compost of yours or bought, that's adding shredded leaves, chemical-free grass clippings, feeding the soil. Because it's just like, on the simplest terms, you drink a glass of water, that glass is empty. Unless you fill that glass back up, that glass is never going to get filled up with water again. Same thing with the soil. If you deplete the nutrients in the soil, there's nothing that can be in our backyards that we can regenerate the nutrients in the soil without adding organic matter. In the woods, in prairie, grasses die, feeds the soil, leaves fall, feeds the soil.
So that's why a lot of gardeners are like, my garden was good for 3 years, and now it's not as good. And that's because you're not feeding your soil. You're not building your soil. You're not adding the carbon. You're not adding nitrogen. Because over time, that newly soil lets the carbon release, and that carbon dioxide gets lost into the atmosphere. And that's what happens. So that you may have this backyard, you turn your soil over, whatever you do, and then it's good.
2-3 years, I've had a great
carbon, the carbon and all that has been held in,
locked in the soil for a while.
So that's why you want to add your whether it be organic matter, leaves, fertilizer, organic fertilizer, what have you, to help build that soil back up and keep those nutrients fresh and available.
We want to add compost, shredded leaves, or chemical for grass clipping. That's a natural item. Now, fertilizer, yes, that does help, but your big punch, your big give back is the leaves and the grass clippings and the compost, and the fertilizer does help to bind that all together.
Right.
So, is there anything else there?
That's just it. Just make sure you're thinking about your soil and feeding it, and it's a living thing.
So that is just a small snippet of the science behind what is microbes and how they benefit your garden, your soil, and what you may have not been aware of that exists in your garden.
For more information, please visit thewisconsinvegetablegardener.com.